Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dice Reviews. We thought we'd try something a little different tonight. Did a couple of series that have hit Netflix that had been pretty highly anticipated. We thought we'd tackle those tonight. Both of us having just powered through both Jupiter's Legacy and Love, Death, and Robots Volume Two. Thought we'd take a stab at talking about them, see what kind of get some thoughts out there in the air. And I think what we're going to do is we'll start off with Jupiter's Legacy, and I'm going to start off with a couple of things here. First of all, spoiler warnings. It's kind of hard to talk about. It's kind of hard to talk about some of these things without a spoiler bit coming up, especially when it comes to Jupiter's Legacy, um, because the ending of it is one of those big deals where there's a lot of stuff that comes together. You can't really talk about like how everything builds until you get to the point and then just be like, I'm not going to talk about that now. You know, for those of you who don't know, um, the Jupiter's Legacy is based off of a Mark Miller comic book. No, we have not, or at least I have not read the comic series. Unfortunately, so I can't give you the perspective there. I can't give you how comics accurate it is. You'll have to make that judgment call for yourself for the terms of this. And Sassy, have you read the?
No.
Have you read? Yeah. Um, we are your two hosts tonight. I am the JestaKing Zarat here with SassyMcNasty 69. For this evening. Maybe next time you'll see two different faces here, or three, or whatever. But for tonight, it's us. And a lot of people were really looking forward to Jupiter's Legacy when Netflix got the rights to the Miller World stuff. There was a great deal of fanfare. I read a lot of articles where people were like, "Oh, I can't wait to see this. This is going to be so great. Finally, this is going to be represented. We'll get another comic book source that isn't DC or Marvel." Um, you know, and I did as soon as it hit. Me being a big comic book fan, I binge watched the shit out of it, and I really wanted to take some time to talk about it. Um, Sassy, kind of, what was your sort of experience with it? Like, did you like binge through it all in like one or two nights, or did you spread it out over the course of the week, or how'd
I binged it.
you binge it?
I
See,
got through all but like 3 episodes, and I went to bed, and then the next day I finished the rest.
I did the same thing. Um, And I'll say this, Jupiter's Legacy deals with and focuses on a group of heroes who've been around for a long time, since the 30s and the 20s and what have you, and they don't immediately explain how they get how they got their powers. They set you up in the world very directly of what they are, where they're at now, and very quickly they identify their code as being a real central theme for most of the characters, specifically the Utopian, because he's sort of the one who like is the champion of this, which is sort of the this you world's version of Superman. Essentially, he's got all the super strength, the super flight, this super durability. They show him. They reference him going out and like dealing with meteors in space and what have you. Um, And the Utopian's got a very interesting journey as to why he believes in this code. Um, but you get this reveal throughout the course of the series, because they do the same format that Arrow did very successfully, in which they set you the world, they show you the sort of the players, and then they cut back and forth between the past and the present to give you the background, to give you the backstory at the same time as giving you the story in the foreground. Um, it's a uh, very successful way of writing. I like the way they pulled it off here. There were some scenes that were a little that made you kind of wonder a little bit here and there, but it does set up quite succinctly. I think one of the big themes is they talk about this code, and the code is very much like the old school superhero genre of you don't kill. You defeat the bad guys, but you don't kill them. No matter what they do, you are better than them. You don't try to rule the governments. You don't try to state, direct, policy for countries. You defeat bad guys, you put them in prison, and that's what you do. And their sort of central conceit here is that it's a very different world than when this, sort of code came about, and it's sort of very analogous to the way we've seen comics grow throughout the decades in and of ourselves. Um, you know, th- and I think a lot of like the Utopian's code kind of comes out of sort of what he dealt with and saw with his father, and what have you. And it's also expressed on the other end by his children. You know, Sassy, I mean, what is your kind of take on like the central themes here? Like, like, how do you feel about the way they presented this?
It was interesting. The whole code thing, yeah, it's very your stereotypical do not kill. But then something that's kind of unwritten in a lot of superheroes is do not interfere with politics, like you said. I don't think I've ever really seen that as like a specified rule before as much, but they were very like they don't even fight in wars. I think they stayed out of the world wars specifically because like we're not going to use our powers for that unless to stop like a supervillain coming in and trying to do something. And that was it. They weren't going to go in and save lives. They weren't going to do anything except stop someone else. And I was just like, and I think that came up in one of the episodes slightly. They didn't cover it too much, I noticed, but they do bring that up, and it was an interesting change on the code because you'd always imagine a superhero like Superman would come in and stop everyone from trying to kill each other and in the war and do 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 stuff like that. But they were
Well,
very
and
no.
well, and to your point, in other comic books, Captain America was born out of
Yeah,
war. He was very definitively he was a product of World War II, and he was there because of that. He obviously fought in it, much more involved in sort of like foreign national policy. Um, but I do think you're right. Like that is something they don't talk about as much. In the Watchmen, very clearly, Doctor Manhattan stepped in. That's very clearly defined.
yeah.
That like many of those superheroes did. Um, and it's not something that is clearly defined. It's just generally one of those things that like it's a bigger story when the comic book characters do take an active role because we just sort of accept that as a background sort of like code that no one talks about. Um, and let's kind of talk about like there was a lot of references to modern day situations, like sort of the modern era's current political climate, in some of the things they talk about. Like there are protests in the very beginning, having to do with some treaty or another, um, very much tapping on that social unrest that we see going on. You know, they, some of the other things they tapped on was like the very changing dynamic of how things are handled in the street. Uh, and I think they do belabor the point quite a bit of the code is not as valid as it used to be. They spend a lot of time browbeating that.
Yeah.
Um, but it is very important because it speaks to the character, to a lot of the characters, none more so than the utopian, which because he is this central character really affects everyone outward from him, as a central figure. um, and as a character you kind of have to feel for him a little bit because going through the backstory, he didn't really specifically ask to be the center point for this. This all kind of like this
Happened.
was stuff exactly, um and so like the fact that it's very important to him, and it kind of extends outward. It is a little bit, at times it can feel a little ham-fisted, but it's also very important to to like what the biggest main character.
And
um
one of the things I noticed throughout was there was this almost underlying implied thing that if a crime was being committed and no one was in immediate danger, sometimes they just didn't help. Like that was the whole the Fox's
Sky
son,
Fox.
Sky Fox's son, his crew. He was like, "We don't kill,"
Yeah.
and there was and Utopian knew who he was, knew where he was, knew how to find him,
Yep.
but never did anything to stop him from doing any crimes. And that was either, could have been something for because of his feelings for Skyfox being his best friend, but also it seemed to imply the we don't kill means if we're not hurting anyone directly, then there's less of a chance of at least someone in the higher ups interfering. It showed the sun interfering with some stuff, but even then it was because there was another superhero there or
Right.
supervillain, I guess. I think if there's no supers involved, and I don't know, it seemed like they didn't interfere too much with that stuff, like
And I
low
gotta,
level crime.
yeah, it kind of feels like they were really only looking out for stuff they felt was the big picture. Um, and to some extent, you can kind of like you can kind of see into that like the same way that some of the other biggest name teams, super teams operate in other comic book deals. Like Batman may stop street crime, and Superman if he witnesses it, and certain members of the Justice League might occasionally get involved in some kind of street crime. But by and large, the Justice League as a whole, street crime's a little below them, so they don't, as a whole, take an interest in that.
Yeah,
And
that's
to some extent, the Avengers are a similar, way. Um,
that's why I
if
wondered if because there's a lot of superpowered people, good and bad, and
Yeah,
those they mentioned people joining the league or the what do they call it in
the Union,
the union, people joining the
yeah,
union, but looked like there was only like 8 spots or 7 spots total. And so I wondered if the rest had like a lower level in the union or if they were just free to do whatever until a spot opened up. I don't remember them clarifying on that much. If it was just the union and that was it, done there.
I don't I don't think they necessarily did. I think like the junior superheroes were supposed to be kind of part of the union or associated status of some sort, but didn't had weren't able to step up to the big chairs because that was the leadership spots. I mean, they do. You're right. They don't clearly define that, and maybe that's something we'll see in the next volume. um, you know, and I feel like, kind of easy to belabor some of the faults of this thing, and you'll hear me belabor a few more. But let's not get away with the idea that I didn't enjoy this or I think it was bad. It was actually pretty good. There were some glaring holes that I saw and some things that were not well developed or not well explained. But I thought the world building was pretty good. I was interested in. Uh, I'm very interested in Black Star, um,
Right?
because he very much kind of seems like the type of villain that not only has the power but has the intelligence, and those are always tend to be the best villains. And the fact that he's kind of a patsy in a lot of this is very interesting because somebody with the kind of like demeanor that they've given him. Once we get into volume two, I expect him to become a little bit bigger part. I expect him to start adding his own machinations into the mix as it goes. Um,
Oh yeah.
there's also the reveal that the Utopian is seeing a criminal mastermind who used to try to kill him for psychological advice.
Yeah, that was I was like, hold up. But like at the same time the mastermind seemed to hate himself for doing it, meaning he was doing a good job or something. And it was just like because when it shows him walk out, the mastermind's like, damn it. Oh, gotta be careful. It's like slams his hand down. I was like, why is he mad? This is a chance to like manipulate Utopian, but it seems like he's doing actually a therapist job of actually helping him out.
And again, there could be some more reveal that comes in
Mm,
in the next volume that we're not seeing yet. Um, the I feel like the as far as the actors go, um, they all did a very good job of passing the idea of who their characters were.
mm.
Some of them didn't get a lot of screen time, and the fact that they did have a decent little body count for what essentially is the lead up, what essentially is like the chapter one, you know, kind of meant that there were a few characters we didn't get much time with. Uh, I did, and maybe it's just because I liked the fact that she was one of the holdouts still trying to uphold the code. I did feel a little something for Ghost Beam,
Mm.
but she was, of course, very short lived. I think she had was in one episode, maybe two.
She was in multiple
Um,
because she was in
was
like
she?
she was there as a friend more than a
That
superhero in
I,
several episodes. She never really
right.
did her
You're
powers
right.
until that moment. Otherwise, it was
Yeah,
just her being like, "Come on, you're my best friend," or "You're my friend." Everyone was like, "Why are you so nice to her?"
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And maybe that speaks to me just not paying enough attention, or maybe it's just that you know, maybe I'm just more partial to the parts where she's actually being more like the scenes where she's talking to Lady Liberty
Yeah.
and she's talking about her, like her thoughts on that was, you know, that's actually was a good scene and it needed to happen and it needed to happen the way it did and the scenes after unfolded the way they did. Um,
I feel like they missed it. Well, I guess it might have been in the writing and based on the comic, but they could have really pulled out the viewers' hearts if they would have kept Ghost Beam on a little bit longer, more screen time of she's just such a likable character, she's super friendly, she gets along with everyone, and then just hi, not like that cat. She's about to be sick.
oh
uh,
no.
we'll do it on the floor. I taught you this. Come on. No, not on my bed. I just watched that. Hold on. I'll be right. Come on. There we go.
And while he's dealing with some cat problems here, I suppose they I think that we're talking about like the different characters and actors. I think the guy who did Utopian, and I feel bad for not knowing his name. I should have actually looked that up before. He did. I think he probably did the best job out of all of them. Not that anybody did a bad job,
Josh
but that guy
Duhamel.
really sort of.
Or Josh
Hmm?
Duhamel? Or Duhamel? Or
Yeah,
Duhamel.
yeah,
Oh, Duhamel. I thought that was Nye. Yeah, Duhamel.
right, okay. Um, I knew it started with a J, but I didn't want to say and then be wrong. The but the way he did a like especially with like the flashback scenes, and I
Yeah.
have to hand it to him. The flashback stuff, I didn't think I was going to get into at first. Like I was like,
It
okay,
was weird.
I want to know where they got their powers, but I want to know quickly and be done with this because American history is not exactly my favorite subject.
It was the
And where they
weirdest thing
started with the Great Depression, yeah.
because there was such a huge gap and they don't explain anything about why they live as long as they did at all. There's never like
Yeah,
a, oh, we're just it's aged slower. I don't remember anything about that. It was just there's him as an old man, and then it goes to a flashback of him as an adult man, and yeah, it's like the 30s. It's the Great Depression. And you're like, wait, that means like
yeah,
70 years has passed. He should be over 100. But
yeah,
him, he looks, you know, well, like he's fit, in shape, and even though he has white hair, the hair makes him look older. Still looks pretty young,
right.
and the wife just
Yeah, oh yeah.
like,
Well, they
so I
both
was
look
like, damn.
Well, they both look like they're idealized versions of the
Yeah,
50s, being in the late 40s, early 50s. Because I'm not sure if you, anyone who's ever watched Spartacus and looked up the ages of the actors, some of the gladiators on that shit. Oh my God. I was amazed to find out how old some of those dudes were, and they were
goddamn.
fucking ripped and looked like they could just eat your lunch. So many of them were like, there were several of them that were like in their 50s. I was like, fuck, holy shit. Like I didn't know you could be that in that like that in that age, at that age. But um, they do look like that, like super super idealized, well fit, like possible, but at the upper level of you work for it every day, kind of like
Yeah,
50s. You know, and I would attribute that just to sort of their superpowers.
yeah,
Um, and and I definitely feel like the but I did get into the backstory so much, and I usually just don't. I don't generally like American history, but like the setup for the Great Depression, like right before the Great Depression,
right.
all of the tension that put between between the utopian and his brother, Shell and Walter, that tension being there because of what happened with that and their father's suicide,
Hmm.
and because of his hallucinations, and that all of that was just really interesting to me, and the setup of their friend, Sky Fox Ben, as him as a character, and we haven't even got to see him in modern times so much.
You saw him a brief
Well,
moment
well,
after they
well,
got their powers, and I think that was it. When
yep,
and when the dead member, the
Yep.
one I can't remember his name, was alive and he had that little item, and everyone was like, "Oh, where? How come you
Yep.
got that? No one else got one." He was like,
Yeah.
"That's
And
because
he
I'm the
was the guy that
best."
was like, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, we don't know what happened to him either. And there's so many mysteries to be revealed.
Well, we know
It's
he
a
died.
really, yeah.
Skyfox
Ooh,
killed him. That was the. That's why they were pissed. Like that's why
but
Skyfox
we
just
don't,
vanished. But as to why, yeah,
w- yeah, we don't know the circumstances. So, I mean, and that I'm looking forward to that mystery being revealed over the course of time. Um, I'm invested. You know, the like, and I think the guy who played Walter was really good. I liked him as young Walter because he really put across that
yeah,
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Everyone who's ever had a brother, regardless of whether you were actually the favored brother or not the favored brother, you know the feeling of trying to measure yourself to your brother and feeling like the standards are different and maybe either too lenient for your brother or too high for you or whatever, and that's always going to create some level of tension. Most siblings get past this to a large degree as we get older, but there's always going to be some sibling rivalry. And when it's there, when you add in something like their business interests and the fact that both the way both of them interacted with their father, the one being sort of involved, but not, 100% this is their life. And the other one being, I am going to take over for dad and I have to know everything and be
yeah.
super involved. And that dynamic of, the one who's trying very hard to impress the father and the one who's not trying as hard, but, maybe feels like they're getting more attention. And I know what it's like to be on the either side of that. I can identify because there are times where I am well aware that it seems like the rules are different from one or the other. And I know that's something that siblings go through everywhere. So as a mark of being identifiable, that made it identifiable. And it makes me love the character of Walter and Brainwave so much more than I probably should at this point, especially given the last episode.
mm.
Um, and
That last episode was. It just took everything we watched up to that moment and turned everything around. Like it was.
I do want to talk about one of the
Yeah.
biggest plot holes and big plot sins here because it kind of bugs me. So we get the big reveal, and we get the big reveal that Walter's been behind all this. He's manipulating everything. This whole thing
Mhm.
has been his plan. But we just spent most of the episode through his perspective dealing with going down in a dying brain and fighting an enemy that we find out really wasn't even in that mind. Now, I could see that if Lady Liberty had been present for most of that, showing that that stuff, because then it'd be from her perspective, and him fooling her, pulling the wool over her eyes. Um, you know, but as it being from his perspective, and we're supposed to be investing in his peril and whatnot, and we're seeing all of this, it just creates the element of unreliable perspective slash storytelling.
Well, I
You know,
wonder if it was because his daughter was there, holding the door open. They were linked in a way. If maybe
that
it's so
could
that way she, if she were to glimpse it, she'd be like, yeah, that's what's happening. Uh,
That could be it. I mean, I guess the argument could be made. It could be like for her perception, but she also seems to indicate that she doesn't know exactly
yeah,
what's going on in there.
which is where, yeah,
Um,
that's like, so what was all that?
yeah,
Unless it was a creation of his own that he left in there to control the clone. And when it went
right,
back in there, that creation was kind of trying to stand up because it knew it was about to be erased. Could have been that.
right.
But they don't
It,
explain that as a possibility, so that could just be me throwing shit out. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, it does. That is the biggest sin that I have with the show is that we spend all this time with Brainwave and his peril inside the now deceased clone of Darkstar's body, going down with this reconstructed brain and what have you, and no one else is shown to be witnessing this. You could have easily kept that dramatic tension by not showing the inside of what was going on there and simply showing that he was still, you know, unconscious, in peril. The scenes that
Hmm.
they did do some scenes with that, like that worked well, and I think they could have stayed with that and used that time to focus the action elsewhere. A little bit more time with Utopian, his son, and Black Star, and their fight might have been a little nicer rather than being dragged through a perspective that is essentially unreliable as far as
Yeah.
storytelling point of view. Now, maybe this is going to get explained in
Yeah.
volume two, and I
Well,
just don't,
it
and I'm not
seemed
seeing where the connect is yet,
it
but it
seemed
seemed like
like
a pretty big
a
hole.
I feel like it was a weird way to really pull down that wool over the viewer's eyes, just the
Yeah.
viewers, to make us trust him a little bit more. So when that twist happened, we were more like, because they kind of hint, they give you subtle
Oh, yeah.
hints where
Oh,
he's
yeah.
like, when he's talking to Darkstar, and he's like, I could crush your mind or whatever, and he does
Mhm.
these things where if no one else were here, I could do this to you, or if I really wanted to, I could do this. And I was like, that's it's a little
Well,
dark, a
well,
little dark.
and you see some foreshadowing it the first time the question of the relevancy of the code comes up when he's talking to Shell and he and Shell are talking to each other, the Utopian and Brainwave, Shell and Walter sitting and talking about the relevancy of the code. That first time you see them sit down and talk about it, there are some things that Walter says in that conversation that sort of make you question his commitment to the code.
Yeah,
So, you know, there's there's already foreshadowing to begin with, and dragging us through what is obviously meant to be what is also meant to be a smokescreen for the audience just kind of like doesn't sit as well.
the,
Um,
the thing that just got me right is this
what's
whole
that?
time we have not seen anything of Skyfox other than that he's a pretty swell but kind of stuck up dude. No, not stuck up, like
Right.
very selfish. Um, and the true villain has been a guy who can pretty much manipulate people's brains.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm throwing out a theory here. Volume
Oh,
2
go
is
for
when
it.
we're going to find out that Skyfox was never the villain and that Brainwave did something to make them all think he was and then got rid of him himself cuz
That would be my thought too.
that's where I feel like it's going to happen. But knowing my luck, they'll both be villains together.
Well, I think your theory is solid, and it's something I was thinking of too. Is that maybe it was never Skyfox that was the bad guy in this whole situation? Maybe that was a manipulation the whole time.
He could have
Uh,
controlled him to kill the other dude and then at that point everyone's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, you're gone. We're getting rid of
or
you."
or potentially he could have changed everybody's memories after
Yep.
killing. He could have killed him himself and then changed everybody's memories after the fact. Um, because we don't know much about Skyfox's powers. Skyfox's powers may make him immune to brainwaves in some way that we're unaware of at this point.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the fact that that's an open-ended question. I love all the mysteries they put out there. I love the fact that they leave a lot for us to throw theories around about, a lot for us to like dig into and try to speculate. It seems like there's a lot of build up to some stuff that could be really good if they can, if they are able to shore this up. I'm willing to do a little bit of forgiveness for some of the weaker elements in this simply because it's the first season. And I'm not going to fry an entire series on mistakes from the first season. No one ever has a spectacular first season with their show. You have good, you're always going to get a little bit of mixed in there because you're figuring out how to make the show. Um,
Do you
and
remember um one of the things that I kind of wish they would have elaborated on is that Barnabas, that Dr. Barnabas, the guy who
yeah,
pretty much Doctor Stranged his way in,
yeah,
was stuck up, flirting with Lady Liberty, and then just gone. And there was
yep.
nothing referencing who he was, his ties to them, other than that he apparently flirted with her a bunch.
No, my bigger question on him was the fact that they made it clear that they needed him to partially reconstruct the brain, or they couldn't even do the stuff that Brainwave and his daughter were going to do. Yet when it came time for them to be there, he was not there, nor was he reconstructing the brain. And I did like Barnabas. I thought he was an interesting character just because he was a little bit creepy and
Yeah, he
sleazy.
feels
You
like
know,
he came across as a villain that they were just pulling in for this, but I don't know. I was so confused as to what he was.
I mean, I get what he was kind of supposed to be, and I liked the fact that his personality was what it was.
He
He's
was
not the
great.
type of personality person you want to hang out in real life, but in the story
Yeah.
construct situation is a lot of fun to play with. You know, and you're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing him up because I was going to bring that up too. It's like, where is this guy? They said they needed him and had to have him. There was the
Well,
whole big sell
they
from
had him
getting
take
away
off the
with
armor
it.
because that was the
Yeah,
inorganic material.
yeah,
But yeah, and then when the time came, they guess they just kind of glazed over it. They were like, "Eh."
yeah.
I'm assuming he must have did what he needed to do when he took the armor off. He must have assembled something, and then he was just gone. That's the only thing I can think of. Or
Well, but there was that conversation that they needed him to stick around, and Lady Liberty was against it. But
yeah,
they were like, "No, I need him to reconstruct the brain, or we can do nothing of what we're talking about."
well he
And
couldn't
she was
do
like,
well he couldn't do organic materials. That was the problem.
"Right,
He can only do inorganic, and that's what I was like. It was so weird that they brought him in, like you said they needed him. He did some of it, and then I don't know. Maybe
right."
they said they needed him, and that's when he said I can only do inorganic, and they were like, oh yeah, but they didn't
And
clarify it. He just came and went. It was like, wait, what? Where'd he
right.
go?
And I think as far as it goes, like the other big theme that I noticed going through this, and there's a lot of themes about family, and
Mm,
like not all of them are super obvious. You get the whole sibling rivalry thing up front when you're looking into the backstory, like when they go into the backstory stuff. You get that. Like right off the bat, Walt and Shell are immediately at odds before anything even starts off. They're coming from two different angles, and you can see that. But there's the other theme with the kids. Um, I love that part of Utopian's character is the fact that he goes through these things not just as a superhero, but as a parent who
yeah,
knows that his child is a superhero and can break things and people far more easily than a normal child or person can. The fact that he's got that he tries very hard, and the fact that he doesn't always know the right thing to say or do, you know, that tension between father and son, as father tries to teach son what's right, son struggles with it because it's a changing world, and
yeah,
it's not everything that you know dad knew and grew up on is going to work anymore. um you know and he's struggling with how do make my father proud and stand in his stead when he needs me to, when he's gone, and still be able to adapt to a changing world. But you also see the other end of it, the other kid, Chloe, who has completely rejected the whole superhero thing and has decided to live her life as a hot mess. um which I get it, and it makes sense, and it's very much, there are times where I feel like it's a little overboard, again, just sort of browbeating you with a theme to a certain extent, but they do have a really good conversation where Utopian comes to her apartment to talk to her, and they're talking, and in the course of the conversation, you you see they just can't find the bridge with each other.
yeah. They
And
struggle.
the struggle is so much harder for the Utopian because as somebody who is a father, you know I know that there are times where you you can't always say the things you want to say, and then you can't always get them across to be understood the way you need them to be understood. And
Oh yeah,
sometimes it is hard to get past the expectations of the other person in the room. And as a person with a father, I know what it's like on the other side of that. How do you express your individuality? How do you get your parents to understand where you're coming from when you're more reactive to what's going on in the current than they are, maybe when they're stuck on the way they see the world, and you're seeing the world as the way as it as it coalesces around you, and those perspectives are very different. And that theme of how do you keep, maintain, and work on the bonds between parent and child, being on both sides of that, that's a weighty issue, and when you're dealing with having superpowers on top of
Yeah.
that, holy shit, you
And
know.
it was a interesting dynamic to see the kind of and the kind of overbearing parenting that he did. The you have to follow this code. You have to do this because he was afraid of if, as a kid, if they just went ha ha and like slapped their friend, they could just rip their head off. So he had to be strict.
Exactly.
He didn't have much of a choice, and how that altered both of them. You have the son who, like you said, just wants to be the utopian.
Hmm.
100%. Do everything his dad does, do it just exactly the way he does. And then you have the daughter who is like, screw this whole thing. I'm out. I'm doing my own thing. I hate this whole chick. I'm gone. And then at the same time, despite how different those two are, they're able to get along perfectly fine. There is like no conflict between them
Yep, their conversations are wonderful. I
because they
do like
feel
that.
they feel the same, but one they just took two different routes.
Yeah, they have, and it's I love the fact that they're more open to each other than they are to talking to either of their parents.
Yeah,
Like you can feel that there's a much more open communication there. And it speaks to the fact that um, Brandon respects Chloe's, sort of individuality and her independence. He sees that she's fucking up, but he's not going to browbeat her about it.
yeah,
He just wants her to treat, the parents with a little bit more respect. That's his only contention with her. Other than that, he can understand where she's coming from, and she can understand what kind of enormous pressure he's under, but can't get him. And despite the fact that he can't get him, or she can't get him to ease up on the nugget, so to speak, you know, does it, they still have those moments where they're able to be like, I wish I could help you more. I wish
yeah,
I could be more for you. But the differences in our lives mean that we have to respect each other's boundaries to the extent there are walls that aren't there with between us like they are with our parents. But at the same time, you know, because we're closer to age, it's a little bit different, different dynamic. And
right.
that's also very true. Um, all in all, I really think that this volume one, Jupiter's Legacy, is a good setup. There, there are some unanswered questions. There are some things that don't quite make sense to me right now. There is one glaring, the one glaring bit on the last episode with Brainwave that
Yeah.
just I'm having a hard time with, and hopefully that gets explained. Um, you know, and I don't
There's
know.
there was
Sorry,
one thing that really confused me is the bag of brown or not brown, blue coke meth
yeah, the
powder,
powder.
yeah.
Yeah, they don't explain what that
And it
is, and
makes
they
like a
don't.
electronical tinkling noise when it spills, like it's something magical. And then she
Right,
just downs the whole bag and finally ends up having a seizure from it. But it was like, what is it? Who they stole it from some special people. It's just like
right.
they never elaborated. He didn't explain to her what it was. No one knows. She just snorted it all and that was it. Done.
Yep. And I think the big thing, I think what Volume One was meant to do, or at least what it did very well, was set the universe up.
Yeah.
This was the exposition season. This was we're going to show you who the characters are. We're going to show you where they're at in their lives. We're going to show you, some things happening. We're not going to fully explain everything, and then we're going to let you know what all the stuff you need to be, thinking about when you head into Volume Two
Yeah.
is. Our big theme here is just dealing with the fact that we need to show you what the central conflicts are and introduce the characters in the world. And it
Yeah.
does that very well.
And it's
Um,
almost smart in the sense of if the network is like, well, it didn't quite hit our numbers,
mhm,
uh, there's gonna be so many people want to know what's gonna happen.
right.
Either the comics will start selling more as people find them and read them, or
Hmm.
people backlash and say, no, we want another season. We want to know what happens to this, 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 and this. It's like they set up so much stuff that. feel like the network should hopefully net. I think it's under Netflix, isn't it? Isn't it just a
Yep,
Netflix original?
it's Netflix. Yep.
Which is usually a good sign. We'll produce the next one and give us some of those answers, and probably raise some more as they get ready for another season, probably.
Well, I feel like, and I haven't seen too many reviews. Actually, I haven't seen any reviews on Jupiter's Legacy. I purposely didn't watch any of them before I
Yeah,
did this video because before we did this one, because I didn't want to be influenced by somebody else's opinion. I wanted to be
exactly.
raw out of my own thoughts in my own head. But just given the great production values that Netflix is able to bring to the table, the acting being as good as it was, and the acting really is, in some points, some of the acting is the strong points here.
Yeah, the
With
emotions
this,
from the past were really good.
the standouts, there are some that are very standout as it stands right now. Characters that, you know, and I feel like it could probably get I feel like it's going to get a two. It's going to get a second season. And I'm pretty sure Netflix will make their final decision on how far they're going to carry this after the next season. If it plays according to, the way I'm thinking right now, is what I see in it. Um, I've watched a lot of Netflix programs, and some of them, they always have great production values.
Oh yeah,
They don't always have, but they're often inconsistent with either writing or acting abilities. I've seen them have some really terrible actors. I've seen them have some really terrible writing, but I've also seen them throw out gems. I never liked the original Lost in the Space. I didn't like the remake movie. I didn't care about it at all. But their remake on Lost in Space, I really could
yeah.
like. So, and I liked the way they handled several other things. So maybe this will be maybe this will be a continuing theme for them. Jupiter's Legacy. I'm gonna give it a thumbs up.
Hmm.
Watch it, try it out. Stay tuned for a season two, and we'll see if it follows through on the early promise that it has
Oh yeah,
going forward. Um, you know, um, but I think we could probably move on to Love, Death, and Robots at this point because I think there
yeah,
was as much hype as there was for Miller World and for Jupiter's Legacy and programs like that. I know Love, Death, and Robots, at least in our group, and I can imagine
yeah.
in many sci-fi nerd fantasy
Well,
groups like ours across the nation, love the shit out of the first one,
yeah,
and we're really looking forward to volume two.
yeah.
Um,
Jupiter's Legacy is number 5 or number 3, trending in the U.S. today, and Love,
oh,
Death, and
it'll
Robots
probably
is number 5. Yeah.
yeah. So Jupiter's Legacy will probably get a second season if it's number three right now. Fuck, I mean that's enough views for them to justify the Love, Death, and Robots. Best first thing I got to say, this reminds me of this show has, and I love the fact, reminds me of Heavy Metal Magazine. If you're not familiar with it, Heavy Metal Magazine back in the 70s and 80s is this magazine, and it was a collection. All it was every month an anthology of different stories and different artwork. You'd find something with a monster bounty hunter in the first part of the book, something with a fire genie in the second part of the book. You'd find something, the third one would be some other really abstract story that we touched on science fiction and fantasy and stuff. It was very over the top. It was very much like there was a lot of sex, there was a lot of gore, there was a lot of blood and violence, and it was very graphic. It was very mature, and I loved it. I loved it, and I will say that they did come out with two movies. The first one was much more like the comic book, magazine, than the second one. The second one had the style of, but it was more one feature length. Love, Death, and Robots. I'm going to call that a spiritual successor
I was gonna say, I
to.
wonder if they took inspiration from that and Black Mirror, because both have that. Well, Black Mirror is definitely probably the most inspiration from it, just because it's the most recent, and that probably got it from the heavy metal comics. So,
Oh yeah, and I gotta say, the first one hit really hard. It was really good, and maybe one day we'll go back and do a retro review of it. We're gonna focus on season two this time. We're gonna the second one, and I think I'm gonna start off with Sassy. What were your favorite episodes out of that? What were your favorite ones? Like in whatever order you happen to think of them.
My most favorite was the drowned giant. Um, yeah.
Interesting.
The second one was I gotta figure out um was Pop Squad, and that is kind of the one I was putting in chat. Like, don't watch this one just because of the theme at first. At least it's yeah, we'll get into it.
Oh yeah.
And then the third one was it's kind of hard to decide, but I really enjoyed, as short as it was, at 7 minutes, all through the house, the Santa Claus one.
Oh God, I love that one.
It was great.
It was just such a fucking amazing one. Um, for my top picks, and this is again in no particular order. I really liked Snow in the Desert
Yep,
um, because
that was a good
that
one.
spoke to my love of visceral sci-fi and post-apocalyptic medium. It did a really good job of presenting a world that made me want to know a lot more about it. Which,
True.
God, if you're going to do an anthology, you really want to present a world that makes the reader go, God, I want to I imagine things about that now. I want to know more about that. That's a you know, and it hit a lot of those spots for me. I loved the fact that the people stuck in the fucking glass and metal fucking containers, the
Yep.
water thieves. I love that bit. I love the fact that the mercenaries and bounty hunters weren't all human. In fact, they were mostly not. You know, um, I loved the fact that there was this great mystery of how Snow is able to continue to exist and heal. And I just thought that was a really interesting premise. I love the visceral action of it.
Yeah.
I loved the world build it, the sort of glimpse into this world. I thought it was very high quality. I liked Ice because stylistically, the story wasn't as
Beautiful.
big a deal
Yeah.
to me, but stylistically, the God, it was beautifully drawn. It was
Hmm.
beautifully put together. That was good artwork, and I can't deny that.
I would say all
Uh,
these are a favorite in some category for me.
you know, um, I really liked All Through the House quite a bit um, because it was such a surprise and
Yeah.
it was so hilarious. And I know at least one other person that will die laughing because I'm gonna show it to him. Chris has got to watch that because he's gonna
Oh yeah.
fucking love it.
No excuse. It's
Um,
7 minutes, and like
yeah,
1 minute of that is the credits, so it's like five,
uh,
6 minutes. So.
yeah, it's just awesome. And as somebody who grew up on like those sort of like holiday special, like Frosty the Snowman, Santa Claus, stop motion, claymation kind of stuff, all that stuff that was super Hallmark nostalgia, that that one made me. I wasn't sure until the reveal of what they were looking. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, we think it's Santa, and then it's something
It's
else, and
just
you're like,
like
oh shit! It's like.
yeah.
Good. Just that moment right at the end where he's like, "What do you think would have happened if we were bad?" Just like that was beautiful. I loved it. It made me laugh because it took all of my expectations of what it was going to be, turned it completely on its head, and I died laughing. I was laughing out loud literally for several
Yeah.
minutes. It just killed me. Um, I wasn't as big on Life Hutch. I thought the animation was really, really good in it,
Beautiful. Yeah.
and I do like the idea of this sort of like unexpected horror survival story type situation. But in no way did that attack bot look like it was supposed to be any kind of maintenance robot.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I
I
I
feel
love the
like,
animation. I love the concept. It was beautifully done,
and it's
but I
kind
can't
of
get past that.
like you said with Snow in the Desert. It's one of those
You know?
things where almost every single one of these built a
Oh
world
yeah.
so
It
well in
did.
the short amount of time
Oh
they
yeah.
had that you either A, knew almost everything you needed to know about the world, or B, you wanted to know more. Life
Oh yeah.
Hutch, it was just kind of space battle, fall the planet, go into the station, and I didn't really care what was the space battle. Like I didn't really think about it, didn't really care about it. It didn't have that same world building like I need to know more. I know enough about it that it's interesting enough.
I mean,
And
I Probably because it's just the way my mind
It'd be
goes. It's like,
nice to
oh,
know.
huge. Yeah, it was like huge space battle. Well, I wonder what that was all about. I wonder what side he was on. I wonder if they were the good guys or the bad guys, or if it was more complex. I
And
wonder what they were fighting over. I don't know any
I
of the.
guess
There was
it's
but I was less concerned
yeah.
about the,
I
you
feel
know.
like if you can take the show and you cut out that battle entirely, you still get the
Mhm.
same show. And I think that's the most
Right,
important part. If it's something
right,
that you can cut out and not show at all and someone can still get the same quality of the show of the video, the clip or
right.
short, then it wasn't really necessary to show that unless you're going to expand on it more and be like, "Oh yeah, this is what's happening." I think
Yeah,
that's where I got that disconnect between them. Everything else had every detail of the show you're watching through, and it's
right.
all tied together in some way.
And I'll take. I want to take I want to take a second with a couple of your picks here because I
Mhm.
had thoughts on them as well. The Drowned Giant. Um, I don't want to say it was my least favorite, but I don't want. But it's
It
not my
is
favorite either. I
it is
really,
fair.
really it. It, I kind of feel that way because I kind of feel like I have to take it out of the equation with the others because it's so much more poetic and
It
so much
is.
more different. It's very poetic, and I like it for the message.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
like this you get and it being the last episode is what I think really got me because you see all these I guess episodes are shorts, but all these shorts with all these varying like just action messages, all sorts of things, and then you just get this solemn, almost poem,
oh
like
yeah,
a requiem of the dead kind of thing. It's
oh
just a
yeah.
guy reminiscing about a dead giant and how human it is, and how it becomes more human as time passes. It was just such a strange but
Well,
fascinating story.
and to some extent, there was the other end of that too. Like the what starts off as this massive wonder, this wonder that everybody can't. It becomes a big, big, big deal, object of fascination, and then it becomes slowly over time just another something to deal with,
A giant
and then
whale.
eventually it passes to a legendary thing and becomes part of the community's culture in a much different way. The evolution from from fascination, from massive, from wonder, from spectacular wonder to you know the sort of realities of what happens when things lose that shine of newness
Yeah.
and then eventually fade to become background in various ways, all
And
but forgotten, and then somehow still so much more relevant.
and it
And
was I think being the final episode and it being about the fading of I guess presence after
mhm,
death, it felt more like it was talking less about the giant and more about just everything in general, whether the show itself, the whole volume, yeah, we're talking about it now, people are gonna love it. It's gonna slowly fade, and then just kind of something that might pop up every once in a while. You might see the bone of the leg or the bone of like the giant's leg, just as we might go, that reminds me of that Santa Claus one. And or
well,
when someone dies, that it's a big moment, and over time it just becomes part of your life. And it doesn't
you
come
know
up as much until you're like, oh, I really miss that person.
yeah, they've got a lot of the and I love the shot of him, driving by in the barn with like the skull with
Yeah.
like the tarp half over it, just sort of leaning there, half forgotten.
Yep.
You just know that people drive by that like, oh, look at that, what is that? And somebody tells them the story and go, yeah, but it was a while ago. You know, you can imagine that at some point there's a kid riding by in a car, hears this story, and they're like, how is that? How did that ever become not, amazing and
Yeah.
interesting? Because to them it's new all over again, and they never get to see the incredible size and scope of it. um, I did think it was hilarious and also very realistic that the penis becomes mislabeled as a
No.
fucking whale
Yep.
penis in a
And
carnival.
it was the
You know?
weirdest thing because that is one thing that it stuck out in my head from the very beginning. Dead naked giant, and not a single person was out down there like messing with the penis. I was like,
Yeah,
someone would be there trying to flop that thing up. But
yeah,
then it brings it out full glory, just in a tank, labeled as a whale penis. I was like, of course, all
right,
right.
Right. Well,
Of
that
course.
yep, there it is. You know.
I thought they weren't going to
Yeah.
show it. I thought they were just trying to be like, PG-13 or whatever.
And those are really poetic, and I have to take it outside of the order of favorite to least
Yeah.
favorite because it stands outside of what everything else is
Yes, very
so
much
much.
so. It is such a
Um,
breakaway from the comedy action of the first episode, the sheer beauty and action of the second one, the third episode, the that will go into detail. Um, Snow in the Desert's the sheer brutality and action and then romance of Snow in the Desert.
yeah.
The alienation of the tall grass. Um,
Oh god, the tall grass, that was
yeah.
one of my favorites too. I was trying to remember, God, what was the name of that episode? It was
Hmm.
so good, it was so good. That's definitely one 'cause I live on the plains, man.
Yeah.
I know how that would feel to fucking get lost in the tall grass. As
Yep.
soon as he started to walk away, I was like, "You'll never find your way
Oh
back.
yeah.
You'll
No.
never you how are you not bright enough to see how tall that is? You won't be able to see a goddamn thing from in there." And then the reveal of what everything oh my god, I love the that was one of those where it told me everything I needed about the to know about the
Yeah.
world, but
It
still
was
somehow left me wanting just a tiny
it was like
bit
a
more.
standard replica of our world. It could be our world with that
Yeah.
one thing, just one shiny thing.
Oh yeah,
And
and and the implication at the end that there's more of them that they're chasing the train. You know, the fact that you start seeing more glow and it starts kind of coming towards the train as it races away. You know, you're
I
like,
I do
ooh,
wonder if they're going to put more episodes because the season 1 was 18 episodes. Season 2
right.
was 8. Such a huge drastic cut of volume 1,
Well,
volume 2. And I don't know if they're going to add more if they're
here's the thing for me. Volume one, there wasn't a serious amount of pressure because they probably
yeah.
had it mostly done before they ever dropped trailers and stuff for it, teasers and whatnot. They knew as soon as the first one hit the airwaves, they knew they needed a second one. And let's look at the difference between the two. And the two of them, and we'll get into this a little bit more detail. There was a lot more CGI, a lot more like straight up high end CGI in this one than there was in the first one. The first one still had a lot of reliance on traditional animation.
And
Um,
that's what I think.
uh,
I'm trying to remember. Wasn't the whole thing with it is they used like a different artist, like different producer. Everything was different for every episode,
right.
which is one of the biggest things I hype to people about Love, Death, and Robots is it's not a normal A to Z type show. It's just an anthology, like it says, of stories, but each one is animated and done in its own beautiful way, and that's what makes them all
Oh yeah.
so special because you're not just looking at the same art style all throughout. You're watching the almost cartoony aspect of anime, like the first episode where the killer vacuum cleaner,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and then you jump into Ice. The almost it's a weird, raw, brutal art style compared to the first. It's not smooth.
Oh yeah.
Everything's jagged and hard line drawn.
Oh yeah.
It's such a sheer change. And then you go to this more realistic look with Pop Squad, and then almost a flat like real people. It was hard to tell it wasn't real people on Snow in the Desert. They did
Oh
an
yeah. Oh
amazing
my God.
animation job.
That was ridiculously good.
And it
Um,
just changes every single one.
and I feel like that's has a lot to do with why it took longer. It's because they had a more involved process doing the animation than they did before, and they didn't. And there was more pressure. You know, we gotta if we want to be able to get this title to strike hot, strike while it's hot with this title, we got to get another volume out, soon.
Yeah,
Um, so we need to get some quality stuff to put on there. We need to get it as quickly as we can. So I think there was a bit of like so much effort went into what they did get that they weren't able to get as much as they got on the first run around.
right.
Um,
And it could easily be that they've been working on more than this and they're just going to do volume 3. They'll
oh no,
pretty much
and
be
that's
prepared.
oh fuck yeah, and I want more. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
as a sci-fi fantasy fan, I want more.
The good thing
I'm
about it
not gonna lie, give me more.
is
Uh,
there are so many stories that they can do this with. Like there's thousands of stories that they could keep going as they just find a story, animate it, give it its own life, and boom.
and they've got and they're what, like, 7 to 15 minutes,
Yeah.
they're really short, so it's really like it's a glimpse. They're
Hmm.
all glimpses. They're glimpses into another world, into something else, and it's brilliant that way. You know, because sometimes, and I guarantee I'm not alone in this. Sometimes my favorite thing about watching anything sci-fi and fantasy is the stuff they don't explain, the
Hmm.
shit in the background that leaves me to wonder about the circumstances surrounding this particular background alien or that particular piece of technology that's set over here, or maybe even you know the implied laws and physics of the universes, the implication of who the power groups might be and what they do, or the implication of what the larger conflict might be, but never fully explaining everything. Give you a glimpse. So you can sit back and go, God, and you can put your own spin on it.
Yeah, it
So
lets
I
you
love
create
these
this
kind of
whole new
weird
world.
titles.
Like
You
you
know.
expand on the world yourself, and that's what makes them really great.
Now I will tell you, some of them are so good they make me want them to make a full length out of it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Snow in the Desert. Um, I, I, I'm sorry, I'm really in love with that world. I want to see
It
way
was
more of
yeah, no, it was a
it.
great world. It was this
Uh,
lovely world, and like I said, there's a favorite among all those for me. Uh, the
um,
ones that impacted me the most were the ones I listed as my favorites because they had
oh
the
yeah,
greatest impact, I guess, on an emotional level. The story of Snow in the Desert and the art and everything about it, I loved it. I mean, I kind of saw the thing coming with the girl being
oh yeah,
something, but it was still amazing. Like it was so great. Like I loved the just. I had to rewind 3 times to see his arm get
right,
blown off because I was so confused why he seemed so casual about it. And then I actually
yeah,
watched it,
oh
and
yeah,
I was like, oh, it grows back.
yeah. I thought the first I just kept watching because I was like they're gonna explain this, and if they don't, then I'm gonna be mad and I'll say angry things. But
Yeah.
the, I was like, holy shit, my reaction too was like, God, he's awful fucking casual for getting his arm blown off.
The first time I
But,
didn't notice, I saw him get shot, but I thought it was in the shoulder, and then the next scene, like him in the desert with a stump, and I was like, wait, rewind. Saw it get
yeah,
blown off, and I was like, rewind, blown off. I was like, huh, okay, I'll just keep watching.
yeah, um, and let's talk real quick about like the emotional impact stuff. Yeah, you mentioned stuff that
Yeah,
hit emotionally. Pop Squad.
Pop
I
Squad.
know you mentioned it.
Yep.
I watched through it because had full intention of doing,
Yes.
this show, and I was like, I wouldn't have probably avoided it anyway, just out of morbid curiosity as to
Oh
what you
yeah.
were talking about. But at the same time, I knew I was going to do this, this deal one way or another, and I was like, I'm gonna
Gotta
have to
watch.
watch,
Yeah,
know what's going on.
and I highly
Um,
recommend it. It is good, but the
I
opening.
I I love the world building. It really gives you. It takes a minute for you to get to
Hmm.
seeing, this sort of like external and whatnot, and get a little bit more reference point. You start with a very limited reference point. Um, but again,
Yeah.
as a parent, anything having to do with children is going to, grab my attention.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
it's a huge dystopian world. I saw that.
oh
It
yeah,
took a moment. At first, they took the mother away. I thought they were gonna like send the kids away to something else. No,
yeah, me
he
too.
pulls out his gun, and I was like, no way.
Yeah,
And
oh yeah,
then I had the expectation. He hid them. He pretended to shoot them, and he hid them.
oh
But then
yeah,
there's the scene where there's blood on his hands. It's like
yeah,
that's literally what he did. He shot the kids. It's like
oh yeah,
that's when I started. I was like, don't watch this, guys. Don't. Like it's great, but it's terrible. And then I actually watched through it, and there's the whole scene in the house where he's sitting with that
yeah.
woman, and it just became so more human, so much more human.
Oh yes.
And that's where the show just made up for, as she's explaining why a little girl is more precious to her than living forever. And it was just like,
Well, and I love the fact that they set this up as this is the choice. And it does create some very deeply disturbing questions that that most people don't even want to struggle with.
Yeah.
They're gonna find challenge. This is probably going to be the episode that generates the most controversy, specifically because of the theme. I understand what the artist was getting at. I understand the process, and the entire episode is a question of what need for children if immortality, because children in essence are our way to continue after we die.
Yeah.
It's our way to feel like in some way our legacy survives, that what we've built on this earth will continue, that there is somebody that will continue on in our name or in our stead when we can't. But if you live forever, huge question. What There are huge questions. Why then do you need children at that point? How do you continue to support a growing population when nobody dies ever? There's
Yeah.
the logistics behind it. There's some very deeply uncomfortable questions and some very
Yeah.
deeply uncomfortable themes, but they bring it right back around, just like you talked about in that scene in the house, where the woman, like that line about, when I look in her eyes, I see life and energy and vibrant. They're not like yours, dead.
Yeah. And
And
the I'm
in that,
making memories I'm going to remember more than a
mhm.
normal day after like a thousand or 100 years. It was
Oh
just
yeah,
like,
and it's that moment that, like, it hit me
yeah.
because I I'm totally the guy who never wanted to be a parent. I never wanted to have kids ever. Um, Now, don't get me wrong, I am 110% grateful I have them. There is nothing I would do to give any of them back. And I understand the moment where the woman goes for the gun
Hmm.
because she's not sure in that moment, and this may be her only chance. I understand that what that feels like, that you know, how that would feel like, the desperation to take any and every chance to save your child from no matter the cost to you. She's screaming,
Yeah.
"Kill me instead." I guarantee that would be me. You know, the you know that there is nothing you would not do in those moments, and there is no argument that you would not throw heartfelt at someone coming to do harm to your child. So every bit of what she said, every bit of what she tried to do, everything that she did in that moment made so much sense to me, and it was so impactful. And despite the fact that the show really raises these deeply uncomfortable themes and uncomfortable questions, it redeems itself in those moments because it's so in that moment, because it's relatable. I mean, it takes that perspective off of the person that you've been following, that you just sort of loathe and despise, and it puts that perspective over to the mother and the child, and then it drops it back over to the man himself. And in that his final moment,
Yeah.
where he has
Standing on the
where he
porch, baby
yeah,
crying in the background, facing his partner.
yeah, and he's come to that realization of what he almost did and what he needs to happen, and there's that moment. And I don't think it was even so much that he realized that what he was doing was necessarily wrong 100%. I think there was a moment of, maybe what we're doing isn't right, but this person standing opposite me does not have that question in their head, and I will never get the chance to answer this question if I don't stop this, my partner. If I don't stop my partner, that question is not answered for me, and there will never be an opportunity for it to be. And he lays down his life right then and there, just for that question to stay open.
Yeah.
You know, not, because I don't see it as a full 100% redemption in that moment. I think there was a moment where he started to see more and be more. The fact that his very visceral reaction was to immediately go to violence when the mother went for the gun, that was a very realistic action for somebody who had spent,
Probably
reaction for somebody.
hundreds, like 100 years
Yeah,
doing this job.
exactly. With the exact same scenario, the fact that there was that door cracked open in his head allowed him to stop before he went too far, and then go out and further that growth by putting himself on the line just to see the question hang open, to not have it, to not have it, ended right then and there. And it's bittersweet and ironic that
Yeah.
for him it does end, and he gets that last look up at that skyline, not even able to see those huge penthouses and the halls of power that he's used to, and his completely self-absorbed girlfriend all the way up there. You know, he can't even see them from the ground level, but he looks up anyway.
Yeah.
And there's that moment where you're like, is he looking up there because he's thinking about what he has just given up? Or is he looking up there in defiance? Or is he looking up there because he feels like he's done the right thing? You know,
Yeah.
it's it's a little bit more ambiguous for me than that. And other people may translate it a much more directly. Oh, he changed in that moment 100%, and everything after that was him reacting to that change. I think it was a door open. Um, you know, I think it was a crack in the door that was enough to allow him to do things that were the right thing to do without fully being there, if you know what I'm saying. Um, and I like that that's seems a bit, and I like that there's a bit of complexity in that.
Yeah.
Um, and the scene with the mother and child is just, it was well written. It was believable. It was brilliant. It was I that moment hit. It was very deep impact.
Yeah.
Um, so
And yeah, it's like it's one of my favorites because of that impact, less so because of the story. Because it's a great story, I'll give it that. But at the same time, it's a story you want to hate because of that whole
mm,
scenario. But then you watch shows like that all the time. Whatever happened to Monday? I think is a movie on Netflix. In a society
I've never
where
seen it.
yeah, it's a society where I think you're only allowed one kid, and a guy
Right?
has seven of them.
Oh, I think I might have heard of that,
And he names
actually.
each of them a day of the week, and they all pretend to be the same. Each day, one of them goes out and pretends to be that one girl, and
Right?
then one day, Monday never comes back. And it's we see these kind of worlds where kids are not allowed, but it's never taken. I don't think I've ever seen the brutality of just
Oh,
execution done. It's usually the
oh yeah.
kids are taken away, they're put into like laboratories, they're experimented on, they're sent to
Right?
other families, all sorts of things, and never just a pop squad.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that's off. There's a lot of stuff that's like happens off camera that we know is brutal.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and it's just there's a and like yeah, I can't say enough about it. It was a really of it. It was a really big, impactful one, and I think the only one we were. What have we not covered? We haven't covered the first one specifically.
yeah. The first one is literally the only one we haven't even mentioned, other than
Okay.
me saying the robots. The tall grass is another one we barely went into as well.
Well, let's let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about automated customer service.
Hmm.
Um, these are not necessarily my favorite bits, but they are a very, very definitively
It,
love, death, and robots
it was a
thing.
quirky Terminator type
You
episode.
well, you had it's the same. It's along the same kind of lines as if you think back to in the first season, the mini deaths of Hitler and stuff like that. Some of the skits that some of the bits they did there, the more comedic themes. It's even a little bit similar to the Three Robots, in the sense that it's very much, and the yogurt one.
Yeah,
That's the one I'm thinking of.
yes, the
It's
when the
much
yogurt
more
took
like
over.
the yogurt one when the yogurt took over,
Oh, big time.
because it's taking a concept that is just stupid silly and going 110 miles with it, and the artwork 100%, the animation 100% draws out very stylistically that is that it fits that niche within this volume. And I feel like, as much as these aren't necessarily my favorite episodes, they should keep them in there because they
Yes,
do feel very, very much
I really
like
enjoyed
a
them.
stylistic thing to be in there.
they might not be impactful, but they were great shows, like great episodes.
Oh yeah.
I enjoyed it. It was quirky. It was funny. I was laughing. The dog and
Hmm.
the woman having the same haircut because the laser and the buzzing.
Oh yeah.
The guy with
Oh
the shotgun getting electrocuted. It was all sorts of fun stuff. And
oh
story wise,
yeah.
it made me laugh. And that was what they were going for. I guess it was impactful in a comedic way. And happiness impacts you less than any most other emotions. It's
Well,
one of the weirdest things, but it is.
it was a nice, it was a fun way to kick things off, and it was
Yes.
a fun way to be like, okay, you're back in Love, Death, and Robots now. Let's let's get you in that mindset, because this is something that speaks to very much what you're looking at, because it's only going to be short, it's going to be crazy, it's going to be um, stylistically different, and then you go on with it, and it was funny,
Hmm.
and I it did what it was supposed to. It did what it was supposed to very well. I was amused. I don't have anything bad to say about it. Um, I just it was just one of those pieces. It's there and it was a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
don't know what else to tell you about it. It was really good. They have the tall grass. Who, God, that was definitely one of my favorites. I
It
love the
was.
animation in it. I
Yeah.
love the storytelling. I love,
So unexpected. I thought it was gonna be like in the first one, the Sea of Fish one, where the guy's like just
yeah,
floating. I thought it was gonna be like a weird, like he walks into the grass and just either becomes one of the floating lights or gets abandoned by them and it's just left in the middle of the desert with nothing or the grass with nothing.
right.
And then it just pulls these weird alien looking creatures.
Well, and the fact that they took elements from both Alien and Zombie, that they were just uniquely sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
They they had the impact of reminding me of a lot of the stuff I've seen from Resident Evil, but it's also reminds me of the Greys, as
Yep.
the alien, as in the alien, the Greys. So it hit like some interesting notes there. Um, and it is true. If you are out in the middle of like the plains and the grasslands and stuff, and you are stopped on the side of the road at the train tracks, don't wander the fuck off into the tall grass. There may not be undead monster things after you out there, but you don't want to surprise wild animals in their natural element. Most of them will run away, but some of them won't, and they'll react badly.
Snakes for
Um,
one.
and, and you also don't understand how easy, if you do not live on the plains or around areas of tall grass, you don't understand how incredibly easy it is to get lost in that shit. Um, Even as a full grown adult, there are places you should not wander into without having marked your path out, having, friends, or knowing the area very well, because there's places yeah, I can tell you right now that if I were in that world, that whole adventure probably wouldn't have happened to me,
Yeah.
because I would have looked outside and been like, tall grass. Hmm. Well, I guess I'll just continue to sit here and wait and hang out. If I'd have gone out for a smoke at all, I'd have probably stayed on the train just for fear of being left by the train,
Yeah.
not even for fear of wandering out into the grass, because that would have never been a thing I'd have been tempted to do. But that also depends on my life experiences of
Right.
having lived in these sorts of areas. Um, but
Yep.
I thought it was really well rendered. I like the artwork.
Oh yeah. It was
Um,
beautiful.
I love the artwork. I love the design elements for everything. Um, and it does have that quality that it could happen in the real world, because at the very end, the conductor is like, yeah, don't mention this to anybody. They won't believe you anyway.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
can very well easily imagine that being a thing somewhere in the world, even in America, where you just that nobody knows about it, because only the people who work on those particular trains would know about it, and they're not talking about it because they know nobody would believe them, and anybody else that witnesses, they're like, nobody's going to believe you.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's crazy enough. It it could happen. I'm not saying it does, did, or will. I'm saying that you could see it happening, because it's one of those things that, like, there are things that are just secrets known only to a few, and not because they want to keep it a secret, but because they know nobody's going to fucking believe them. Um, you know, so there was something very believable about it. And I also like the fact that it gave us a very different mode coming right out of Snow in the Desert.
Yeah.
You go from this, sort of very actiony, where the main characters are competent and, you realize, oh, they're taking these risks that they know they can handle. This guy's a poor luckless chump who just made a dumb decision and is in way over his head, way the fuck over his head,
Yup.
and literally, and doesn't even fucking know it. Um, and it's a nice change of pace from action adventure to thriller in its own way. Um, I really enjoyed it. Um, so I'm I'm just gonna say overall, I loved Volume Two, Love, Death, and Robots. I loved it with it was a great deal of fun. Um, and it really kept to what it was supposed to be, what the whole thing was meant to be. As far as it goes, comparisons to Volume One did, as pointed out, have more episodes, which gave it a little bit more breathing room to do more things. I felt like, as diverse as Volume Two was, Volume One was more diverse,
Oh yeah.
potentially because they had more episodes to work with, but they also kind of went to several different places.
And it almost
Um,
seemed like in Volume 2 they settled more to the realistic look. If you look
mhm,
at kind of the first one with Pop Squad, Snow, kind of Tall Grass, all through the house, Life Hutch, and Drowned Giant, they were all
yeah,
CGI, but in a more real sense
yeah,
compared to
they were
Volume
more
1's,
photorealistic animation
um,
than
which
Volume One.
I mean, the first one had a lot. Even like Sony's Edge is more realism, but then you had like the yogurt, um,
Mhm.
the was it Sucker of Souls, The Witness, while using realism,
Yeah,
blended that with this weird like pop art kind of feel.
well,
Suits with
and
the
you had
robots in the farm, Good
Suits,
Hunting,
yep,
the
you
animated,
know,
yeah,
well, and the one about I forget the name of it, the one about Dracula, that
yeah,
one,
that was
the art
the
style
Sucker
was
of Souls, yeah,
Sucker Souls, yep, and then what was the other one I was thinking of that I really liked from Volume One? I'll think of it later. But they had some, they were all over the place.
yeah.
Oh, I remember what it was. The one with the guy and the spirit fox girl.
Oh yeah, that was the Good
Um,
Hunting, yeah, the animated one.
Good hunting, good hunting. Because that was much more anime style, and
Hmm.
I feel like they went stylistically. They had more different types of styles in Volume One artistically, and a lot more different kind of like genres, and there was a bit more diversity in the sense
Yeah,
of what was coming out of it. But
but
then again,
yeah,
they also had more episodes to
more than
play with.
twice, yeah.
And so like I think as it goes forward, Love, Death, and Robots has got a great thing going on. I look forward to seeing more of it. I mean, what do you think, like comparison wise?
I
Like, what
think
is?
they might be trying to go for a if unless they're stopping right now, which would be so dumb, they might be going for a shorter volume size, but shorter delay. So like
Right.
volume 1 to 2 was what, over a year? Maybe more? I feel like let's see, I don't know if it has the time. No, it only shows the volume two's release. Let's see. Volume Yeah, volume 1 was released in 2019, March of 2019. So more than 2 years delay between the two of them. With only 8 episodes, it might be something that they probably did more than eight, or are
Hmm.
doing more than eight, because they're probably doing a lot of this simultaneously. If you've got different
Oh
art
yeah.
styles, you probably
Yeah.
have different art teams.
Oh yeah.
So they'll probably start pumping them out. I'm hoping like every 6 months or something. There'll be like another 5 to 8 episodes, 5 to 8 episodes, giving people more time to watch it and less time to have to wait between. Like I want to watch more, but I already watched all 18 episodes in one sitting.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, I went through volume one fairly quickly as well.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
mean, it was so anticipated, and I loved the idea that it. I immediately, when the first one was released, I was like, "Oh my god, it's in the same vein as like heavy metal. I got to check this
Yeah.
out." And to some extent, the same vein as Liquid Television back in the day, because music MTV, before they became about reality television, did a mashup like animated anthology show, Liquid Television, which was pretty good, and it birthed the Aeon Flux series, um, which was cool, good, somewhat confusing, and lost people a lot faster than I would have hoped for. Because eventually people were like didn't care because they couldn't keep up, uh, and because it was a very confusingly written story, which is fine, and I'm down for it. But in the late '80s, people were not as into that, um, so it didn't last as long. Um, if we're looking at it from terms of um, what Love, Death, and Robots does and can do, it does what it's doing very well and needs to continue to do what it's doing very, very well. But I also see the potential for them to, if some of these become like worlds that people want to see more of, maybe even being able to launch some limited series off of some of this if they can find writers that can put something together that works for it. Um, there there's an argument to be made for something set in the Good Hunting universe from season one.
Oh
There's
God, that was such
always
a beautiful one.
Oh yeah, and there's something to be said for a longer or for a limited series with Sunny's Edge.
Mm,
I could see a limited to moderate length, depending on how well it does with Snow in the Desert. Um, I think that one gains more traction just because of the high-end art style and the fact that it speaks to both post-apocalyptic and sci-fi themes of action adventure that people love.
oh yeah,
You know, I think that, but I don't think this should ever detract from Love, Death, and Robots doing exactly what it's doing now. I think
exactly.
if you find something that people want to see a longer form deal of, you can run with it, you can do it, and some of it'll work out really, really well. But I look forward to seeing volumes 3, 4, and however many they decide to make because
Big time.
good shit.
Yeah,
Good shit. Even the weaker episodes, even the weaker episodes, are still really really good. And even the episodes I'm less into still have something impactful, or something, either something impactful to say, or very beautiful artwork, or a world that is worth exploring or imagining in. Um,
yeah. It's showing off the talent of people that might not normally have the chance. That's the biggest thing. Like it's giving these artists, these writers, even these shorts, if there's someone out there that's like, that was a really good art style, they might look into who did that art
oh
and
yeah,
hire them. Or this story was amazing. We want to make a whole series off of that. Let's contact the writer. Stuff like that.
oh yeah.
It's getting a lot more recognition to these people, which is also really nice.
You know, you know, and I my final judgment, Jupiter's Legacy, great setup, has a lot of promise, but there are also some glaring continuity issues that need to be addressed and or dealt with, or at least swept under the rug in a way that we forget about them going forward. um, I definitely want to see more of it. I am invested and definitely want to see more of it. Um, I overall my judgment on that is that's kind of how what I think about it. Sassy, what's your final word on Jupiter's Legacy?
Yeah, going in, I was skeptical because I saw the I think it's labeled as the current generation of heroes must pass down their code to a new generation of heroes who doesn't quite agree with it, kind of thing. And I was like, this sounds like it's gonna be a little goofy. And then the first episode in, you see a superhero punch a guy's head off, and I was like, oh, it's gritty, okay. And yeah, from that moment on, it's definitely something that I want to see a lot more of. So I'm highly expectant of the next series or next season.
I'd say my final take on Love, Death, and Robots Volume 2.
Yeah,
Awesome.
just
Keep
keep
it
it
up.
up.
Just fucking keep doing that. That's a train that I'm down for.
Yeah,
Even the bad ones still hold something of great relevance and interest
yeah,
for me. Um, and that's not to say any of them are bad, just some that I objectively am not as interested in.
exactly.
Because hey, something I might not like might be somebody else's favorite.
Yeah,
Um,
always.
you
Like that's what's great about it is you and I came in here and I was like, my favorite is the drowned giant, and you were like, oh. And then you were
well,
like, mine's snow in the desert. I was like, okay, I could.
yeah,
It's something we can agree on, but we have our own
yeah, different
perspectives.
takes.
I like it.
Yeah, different takes on it.
Yeah,
They might rank a little bit differently in our
yeah.
sort of consciousness of good, of top 10 or whatever. Um, well, right on. This has been a
Mhm.
lot of fun. Kind of sitting and talking and breaking down, the sort of like some cool stuff that we as nerds love, and we hope you as nerds love, or might be interested in. I'd like to do more of this.
It was fun.
We'll,
We need to get
we'll
more of
talk,
the people in here.
oh yeah, I'll we'll talk about, maybe we'll talk about like ideas for different things that we could potentially, like different shows and movies we could
Yeah,
review and
we
whatnot.
we could do
Um,
video games too. There's a video
of
game
the
that a lot of us have played, kind of
Fuck
thing.
yeah, fuck yeah! Those of you out there who watch on YouTube or Twitch or wherever, send us a fucking message. Through the message ways.
Yeah,
Like comments on YouTube, or what, or send us something on Twitch, or to our email or what have you, and be like, hey, we want to see you do a review of blah blah blah, and we'll put it in the suggestion box, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see what we can do.
hell
Um,
yeah.
I know I personally, just from doing this, have a couple of things I want to do, because I want to do a full review of season 1 of Love, Death, and Robots, and I
That would be
also want to
fun.
do a review of Disenchantment.
Have not
Um,
fully watched that one. That was one that it did not get its hooks in me as much. So I'd probably watch it and then see if I can do a review of it. But I'll see if I can get to watching it.
I mean, well,
Someone's
and
watched it though. I know some people have seen it.
I was gonna say, and it's not like it has to be the same cast doing the
Exactly.
show every time. If you guys have watched something that I haven't watched and you guys want to do a review of it, go for it, man. If want to watch, if we want to have more than two people, that's great. If we want to do four, that's fine. If we want to mix it up and have different reviewers on, that's absolutely what this show can do. What we
Heck
can do
yeah.
with the show. So. Um, but I think I mean, unless you have anything more significant to add on either show, in which case take the floor.
Yeah. I'm
All right.
good. I think we covered a good amount. It was 2 hours, so that was impressive. It flew by.
I did, didn't it? And it's just like, yeah, uh, some of that is my propensity to talk forever, but that's kind of a good thing when your show is about talking.
Right.
um, but I think this has been our review, Pair O Dice Reviews.
Mhm.
First one, Jupiter's Legacy and Love, Death, and Robots Volume 2. Stay tuned. We'll probably do more of these going along. With that said, let's say goodnight and get out of here. Good
Good night.
night. Happy watching.